Sarkis, it's live.
Hello.
Okay, everyone, good afternoon and welcome to our session. Maybe you want to make it a little lower. I'm a loud New Yorker. I'm loud enough. So in this session, I think following a very lively following a very lively morning session, a very informative one. I hope lunch was not too heavy, so people are awake and vigorous and somewhat and receptive. What we hope to do is present a number of cases looking at how we respond to these cultural crises in the world. So we're really looking at a number of crises that have had responses supported by ALIPH. People will make presentations, and then hopefully at the end we can have a lively discussion. So my name is Richard Kurin. I'm on the foundation board, the ALIPH Foundation Board. My day job is with the Smithsonian Institution in Washington, D.C., and it's very good to be back here in Abu Dhabi. Our first presenter, the Director General of Antiquities of Lebanon. That is a very tough job. Sarkis Khoury. Sarkis?
Bonjour. Mesdames, Messieurs, chers collègues et chers amis, au nom du ministère de la Culture et de l'ensemble de mes collègues à la Direction générale des Antiquités libanaises, je tiens sincèrement à vous remercier pour l'organisation de ce forum prestigieux qui me donne l'opportunité de partager avec vous l'expérience libanaise d'intervention durant les crises, surtout après l'explosion du port de Beyrouth, le 4 août 2020, et de vous présenter le grand projet patrimonial que la Direction générale des Antiquités a initié en association avec un nombre de partenaires institutionnels et associatifs.
Translation? No? Sorry, 1 minute. Is somebody translating?
In English? Sorry.
They can't hear. These guys can't hear. I'm sorry, Sarkis, you want to start again? Let's see if they can
Yes.
Test. Just test.
Mesdames, Messieurs, chers collègues, chers amis.
No, they're not hearing. They're not getting.
What should I do?
Sarkis,
Yes.
you are on again.
Okay.
Very sorry to all of you for the delay, but you'll appreciate the translation. Thank you.
Mesdames, Messieurs, chers collègues, chers amis. Au nom du ministère de la Culture et de l'ensemble de mes collègues de la Direction générale des Antiquités, je tiens sincèrement à vous remercier pour l'organisation de ce forum prestigieux qui me donne l'opportunité de partager avec vous l'expérience libanaise d'intervention durant les crises, surtout après l'explosion du port de Beyrouth le 4 août 2020, et de vous présenter le grand projet patrimonial de la Direction générale des Antiquités a initié en association avec un nombre de partenaires institutionnels et associatifs du domaine du patrimoine et des musées. Dans les heures qui ont suivi la tragique explosion de 4 août, les équipes de la Direction des Antiquités se sont mobilisées sur le terrain à la fois pour intervenir sur les situations d'urgence, mais aussi pour réaliser un état de lieu complet des dégâts sur l'ensemble du patrimoine architectural et des musées de Beyrouth. C'est ainsi qu'est né, en 4 jours, le projet Beirut Assessed Cultural Heritage, dont l'acronyme BAC porte le nom de l'illustre compositeur qui mena la musique classique européenne à l'un de ses plus hauts sommets. Avec le projet BAC, c'est d'ailleurs l'harmonie et la collaboration envers un patrimoine culturel meurtri. Le projet BAC intitulé Action Plan for the Recovery of Beirut Built Heritage porte sur la destruction qui ont touché l'ensemble des quartiers historiques de Beyrouth. Plus de 640 bâtiments patrimoniaux ont subi des dégâts, ainsi que des musées, des bibliothèques et des industries culturelles. C'est en un mot un patrimoine vivant. C'est évidemment un projet d'ampleur considérable qui a nécessité l'aide de nombreux partenaires, notamment ALIPH, le premier intervenant, qui a proposé une enveloppe globale de 5 millions de dollars pour la sauvegarde du patrimoine bâti et des musées de Beyrouth. Un budget à premier égard limité, considérant que la somme des dégâts dépassait 300 millions de dollars. Néanmoins, cette initiative, en plus du soutien moral d'ALIPH envers la Direction générale des Antiquités, a créé un effet de boule de neige et régénéré des autres initiatives. Cela a permis à la DGA de créer une plateforme avec tous nos partenaires internationaux, publics et privés, notamment l'UNESCO, avec les Beirut Initiative, l'ICOMOS, l'ICROM, l'IFPO, le musée de Louvre, l'Institut national du patrimoine français, le gouvernement italien à travers leur ambassade au Liban, l'ambassade allemande avec le DAI, Blue Shield, World Monument Fund, Honor Frost Foundation, Chrétiens d'Orient et bien sûr le BBHR 2020, composé d'architectes volontaires du Centre de restauration et de conservation de l'Université libanaise, qui ont fourni un travail remarquable pour réaliser les premiers diagnostics des dégâts sur le terrain. J'espère que je n'ai pas oublié d'autres partenaires. Au-delà de ces partenaires institutionnels, je tiens à saluer les initiatives bénévoles provenant de la société civile qui apportent une contribution essentielle à la reconstruction. Le premier projet porte sur la réhabilitation du musée national de Beyrouth, car parmi les musées qui ont subi les effets du souffle de l'explosion du port, le musée national de Beyrouth, notre beau musée, symbole de notre unité nationale, de notre histoire commune et de notre mémoire partagée, a en effet eu beaucoup de dégâts matériels. Ses portes, fenêtres, ascenseurs, les systèmes de sécurité ont été soufflés et ont nécessité une intervention d'urgence. Toutefois, au milieu de ce chaos, la collection archéologique a été intégralement préservée, les éclats de verre n'ayant provoqué que quelques altérations légères sur les objets situés à proximité des fenêtres. Le projet de restauration du musée national, dont les travaux ont commencé dès le lundi 31 août, nous le conduisons grâce à un soutien financier d'ALIPH et l'expertise du musée de Louvre. J'en profite pour remercier chaleureusement la Fondation ALIPH pour l'aide d'urgence qu'elle nous a immédiatement accordée et qui s'élève à plus de 200 000 $. À titre personnel, qu'il me soit également permis de remercier Valérie Freland, directeur exécutif d'ALIPH, et Jean-Luc Martinez, l'ex-président directeur du musée de Louvre, qui m'ont témoigné leur soutien dès le lendemain de l'explosion. Cette aide nous permettra non seulement de sécuriser le musée, mais aussi de réparer les dégâts ayant affecté les locaux de la Direction générale des Antiquités. Même aussi beaucoup des projets que ALIPH a menés à propos de 17 projets au Liban. Je ne veux pas les citer tous. Actuellement, le projet BAC a réussi de terminer la première phase d'urgence, qui consiste à consolider les édifices les plus endommagés et les bâtiments ayant perdu leur toiture avec la saison des pluies. Une course contre la montre a été engagée pour que les bâtiments qui ont pu résister à l'explosion ne soient pas définitivement détruits sous l'effet des intempéries. Sur le terrain, j'ai déjà pu constater les efforts bénévoles d'entrepreneurs, d'architectes, des techniciens, tous mobilisés pour protéger en urgence les demeures les plus endommagées. Le ministère de la Culture, la Direction générale des Antiquités, a surveillé à accomplir approximativement 60% de la deuxième phase, qui consiste à consolider l'enveloppe des demeures afin de restaurer leur intégrité structurelle et architecturale, de restaurer les décors architecturaux des maisons dont certains sont d'une valeur artistique exceptionnelle. Ce travail se fait en collaboration étroite avec des experts de haut niveau. Actuellement, on estime un manque de budget de 100 millions de dollars pour la continuation des travaux de restauration. Chers partenaires et collègues, c'est un défi considérable qui se présente devant nous pour défendre notre patrimoine commun, préalable incontournable à la reconstruction de l'avenir de l'humanité. Mais ce défi, c'est notre quotidien à la Direction générale des Antiquités depuis des décennies. L'expérience libanaise montre l'importance de la collaboration avec la communauté internationale. Enfin, le ministère de la Culture, Direction générale des Antiquités, se tiendra toujours aux côtés de celles et ceux qui voudront œuvrer à la protection de notre patrimoine commun. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much, Sarkis. And I think in keeping with the spirit and the question of this workshop is, Sarkis, think about, okay, how can we do better? We don't want there to be a next time, but how can we do better? Because that's the overall import of holding this forum and holding this session, which is, I think many people have been inventing this cultural heritage practice of responding to crisis in very short terms. And as we invent this field of cultural heritage response and protection, how do we do it better in the future so we learn? The ALIPH board will meet on Wednesday, and this is one of the questions we're going to consider. That is not only in terms of the making of grants, the evaluation of projects, but how do we improve our own process in the future? So that's something to keep in mind. Our next presenter from Ukraine, the director of the Maidan Museum and the co-founder of the Heritage Emergency Response Initiative, Ihor Poshavalo. Ihor, welcome.
Thank you.
Ihor doesn't really need a microphone. If you know Ihor, you know he doesn't need a microphone, but...
Thank you so much. Good afternoon. It's a big privilege to be here with you, to join ALIPH family, and thank you for having Ukrainian delegation here. As Richard mentioned, really it's a time, at least for Ukraine, to understand how we can act better in crisis. No answer at the moment, because we are in a process. Maybe after, in a post-war period, we will speak about it in a much more confident way, but now it's also our different ways to respond to the crisis, which happen to be so vast, unexpected, and so large scale. You all know that Russians attacked not only our civil infrastructure, not our military armed forces, but also cultural heritage. And you can see some examples, many of them. And it's quite clear that a lot of even politicians name this conflict, and this is really war, as a heritage war or identity war. You can see quite humble statistics of the destruction. Why humble? Because Ukraine has no access at the moment to many occupied regions in Ukraine. And therefore, the Ministry of Culture has quite a comprehensive list of objects being damaged or destructed, including hundreds of cultural centers, religious sites, libraries, and dozens of museums, monuments, theaters, and philharmonies. And often speaking about the damage to cultural sector, we also speak about people, because about 8% of cultural institutions are on temporary occupied territories, and most of these people fled outside this territory, outside of their homes, their home institutions, and many of them outside of Ukraine. But not only damage and destruction of movable, immovable, tangible, intangible cultural heritage are targeted by Russians, but looting and illicit trafficking, also a big issue today in Ukraine, and we talk a lot about this. And you can see some examples which became world known. And Kherson Art Museum, about 90% of artworks looted and relocated to temporary occupied Crimea. And the museum professionals, museum people from the Kherson Art Museum identified their art collection, which is today in the Central Museum of Tavrida in Simferopol. You can see some of them in stock in corridors. It was in social media, and we don't know what was the reason to make this collection illicitly trafficked public. Maybe the most important of it is somewhere hidden, not public, maybe someone's collections, so-called black collectors' collections. And of course, a lot of art objects, including archaeological, historical values. Maybe you've heard about the Scythian gold collection from Melitopol, local law museum also looted. And it was hunted for this. And our American colleagues, including the Smithsonian Institution, Smithsonian Cultural Rescue Initiative, and that famous for Ukraine, the Satellite Heritage Laboratory in Virginia at the Natural History Museum, they helped us to trace those crimes against culture, because satellites help to collect evidences, to collect facts about looting, about illicit trafficking. And together with ICOM, the Ukrainian committee worked out a red list for ICOM, which we hope will be quite instrumental for customs, for auction houses, because the scale of illicit trafficking of Ukrainian cultural treasures and values is enormous. Of course, we had a lot of challenges, especially in the first day and the first weeks, even first months of the large-scale aggression. The war started in 2014. And at that time, we also tried to understand how we have to respond. It was not easy, but the military operations, military actions were stopped in eastern Ukraine, in Donbass, Luhansk and Donetsk region. Therefore, a lot of people relaxed, unfortunately. And we talked a lot, we tried to do something, of course, self-coordination, but it was not so relevant for majority of us than it became in last year, 24th of February. And in that situation, when all Ukraine was attacked by Russian missiles, by air bombing, we need the high-speed response. We don't have time to just to sit, to discuss, to analyze, we should react. The constant change of front line, and the front line is over 5,000 kilometers. It's a huge one, and it is very dynamic, and it was dynamic from the very beginning. It was hard to predict what to do, what are priorities, because it's not possible to evacuate the whole country simultaneously. Of course, we were lacking the adequate solutions for evacuating of collections, a lot of things, and Katerina Chuyo maybe will tell a lot about this, because evacuation, according to Ukrainian laws, means evacuating the cultural treasures outside of so-called war zone. But all Ukraine was war zone. So evacuation, according to our law, means evacuating abroad. And it's a very complicated process which needs a lot of coordination and agreements. Of course, the challenges were in coordinating different policies and actions within the country and abroad. Most of my colleagues got a lot of questions the first day, and the next day is how we can help you. Simple questions, but hard to answer. That's why we needed coordination on different levels, horizontal, vertical, to act effectively. Of course, we needed the crisis management leadership, and we did not have such one because our system, cultural emergency system, is not developed, because Ukraine, quite a peaceful country since the Second World War, and we never considered we would face such a disaster. And of course, lack of awareness by military of the cultural heritage importance. It was talked today on the first session, plenary session, about the military should be our partners, and we talk in Ukraine a lot about creating CPP unit, Cultural Property Protection Unit in Ukraine, and a lot of NATO armies and CPP units are going to share their experience, and we plan that our military will be our partners in protecting cultural heritage. And of course, one of the most important challenges, we were not ready for rapid response while having the military threat, while the conflict, the war was unfolding. So to respond to this situation, we immediately, within the first days, we founded a voluntarily initiative, which we named entitled HERI, Heritage Emergency Response Initiative, just with the mission, quite clear, the mission to respond to the crisis. And we plan to coordinate, to provide our own first aid and salvage operations. We planned and we did documentation, and of damage and crimes, mystification, later memorialization of the war, and we are also engaged in recovery and modernization of culture processes, which we discuss a lot today. And so the partnership's not only in words and ideas, in strategies, but in action. You can see that immediately, the first months, the packaging materials were the most in need. And we launched our survey. Harry launched a survey to answer the question, how to help. Launched a survey among our colleagues, and we got a lot of requests and resent them to our partners abroad. And you can see some of them mentioned here, including ALIPH, Prince Claus Fund, SIR, a lot of ministries. So it was very, very moving and very emotional how the world reacted and how the world launched so-called cultural lend-lease for Ukraine. And this is interesting. This is on a cardboard. Among the packaging materials, we have found this handwritten plate. Good luck. We are with you, Louvre team. Very emotional for us, very supportive, because we understood that all the world is with us. And of course, not only packaging materials, but also we helped our partners from abroad to provide financial support on the ground. And Europa Nostra, we, together with the ALIPH Foundation, launched the Solidarity Fellowship for Ukraine. Very important. We provided some stipends and fellowship, not for all who need it, but the most active, to cultural activists, those people from occupied territories, from other who were not caring about their own collection, people and buildings, who were helping others. Of course, we also launched, Harry, monitoring and documenting crimes, together with CRY, with Ministry of Culture of Ukraine and General Prosecution Office. It's very important because we wanted not to document crimes and to put files somewhere in our table. We wanted to be them instrumental. We wanted them to be taken one day to international courts. And of course, we launched quite intensive damage and risk assessment processes together with ICROM. We not only translated, we just adopted the assessment tool on the cell mobile phone application. And e-commerce was also engaged, Ministry of Culture, and even National Council for Reconstruction, which was initiated by our government, by President of Ukraine. And we plan that all those documentation will be very, very instrumental, helpful for the recovery and for prosecution in international courts. Very important it was for us, 3D modeling and laser scanning. In Kiev, one day in spring, a few months after the attack, the St. Sophia Cathedral, which is in the UNESCO heritage list, happened to be under threat. There were a lot of information that Russians plan attacking downtown of Kiev, and St. Sophia, this fantastic complex, was under threat. And we talked to many people, and they said it's not possible to protect any objects against the missiles. No sense of sex, no plywood, nothing. But documentation, very deliberate contemporary documentation, 3D scanning, laser scanning can help us maybe to reconstruct if the cultural objects would be damaged. It was also quite important for us, and we launched the capacity building, individual and institutional, and due to UNESCO, ICROM, Heritage for Peace, Chief Association in Italy, and we were so happy to get translated the UNESCO's and ICROM's guidelines for evacuating cultural treasures, values, and right now we are in the process of translating ICROM's toolkit and handbook on first aid to cultural heritage. Also, control of illegal trafficking is also one of our priority, and field trips, field expeditions, during which we do a lot of work because we would like them to be complex. Sometimes it's quite problematic because you have to get access to the damaged sites. Quite problematic, dangerous, a lot of mines, police engaged, armed forces, but we got some funds from Prince Claus, from ALIPH, ICROM, and World Monument Fund, and it's for us very, very instrumental things. What can be done more? Of course, 1 year after, we again speak about better coordination. And we discussed a lot, we need a kind of a coordination body, a kind of a consortium, not for one project or that, but for providing all the necessary activities, for defining priorities, for providing analysis of the situation. And of course, we need stronger cultural policy and cultural sanctions. We talk a lot about this, and we see how international bodies, international organizations are not effective in this situation. We need advocacy and promotion for Ukrainian culture, and we have in Ukraine quite effective Ukrainian Institute, which provides a lot of cultural events abroad. So please, if you have interest, connect with them. Digitalization of cultural property is a separate, very important process which has been launched in Ukraine due to international support. Documenting crimes. We've been in the Netherlands due to the recent project. Last week we've been to International Criminal Court and also discuss a lot how to combine, because we have a lot of missions in Ukraine, but they work not in close coordination and sometimes duplicating the same efforts. Also, we need a strategy and action plan for cultural recovery, reconstruction and modernization in Ukraine. It was our president clearly put that we plan not only to rebuild what was destructed by the Russians, but we would like to use this chance to modernize Ukrainian culture, to make it accessible to the rest of the world. Of course, capacity building is important, and it's a very, very fantastic in how everything is going on in Ukraine, a lot of institutions being supported by international partners. And we always mention that all these fantastic, huge efforts all of the world should result in creating a sustainable national cultural emergency system so that our culture may become much more resilient. Because this war may finish soon in peace, but this peace can be temporary because Russia is our neighbor. Nobody can predict, and we have to learn to live in these realities, and we should think about sustainable cultural heritage protection system. And of course, we need harmonization of Ukrainian laws with EU's and world cultural legislation. So we have some plans, and you can find them on in our social media. We just defined them in short-term, mid-term, and long-term perspectives and coordination, documentation, risk mitigation. But what is important, this is the long term we are also discussed today, because we want to activate the cultural emergency response model in Ukraine. We would like to make it sustainable, and of course we want to integrate it into the world cultural emergency systems. So that's in brief. Thank you so much for the fantastic support, which we enjoy, if possible to say so, but we feel this partnership in actions. This is so important to us. Thank you so much for standing with Ukraine, and I hope that we will celebrate the Ukraine's accessibility to the rest of the world. Thank you so much for supporting us.
Thank you, Ihor. It's there's a saying: it takes a village, to do anything, and in this case, it takes a world to help Ukraine. Our next speaker is Svetlana Strelnikova from the National Center for Research and Restoration. And I have a particular privilege because with Svetlana, we've emailed, we've Zoomed, but seeing here today, and we've worked together for the last year. And it's just good to see the brotherhood and sisterhood among people who are indeed helping to safeguard a culture that's under such threat. Svetlana?
Вітання всім учасникам форуму, особливо команді ALIPH, яка стоїть на варті збереження історико-культурної спадщини в світі.
Hello. Just to say that I'm a part of ALIPH team, and I will be also helping Svetlana with translation. So thanks to you all for being here, and especially greetings and thanks to the ALIPH team for preserving Ukrainian culture heritage.
Я представляю Національний науково-дослідний реставраційний центр України. Це провідна державна інституція, яка створена 1938 року.
Yes, I would like to present you the work of the National Research Restoration Center of Ukraine. It was founded almost 85 years ago, and
Основне направлене нашу діяльність – це консервація, реставрація, дослідження, стажування, підтримка і допомога музейним закладам України, саме музеям, заповідникам і галереям.
so the main objectives are to restore, to make the conservation works, and as well as to make the research. And we mostly work with the museums, with the reserves, and with the galleries.
Реставраційний центр має 3 філії в Одесі, в Харкові, Львові, основна організація в Києві, яка якраз забезпечує збереження і допомогу музейним закладам по всій Україні.
The headquarters are in Kyiv, but we also have 3 important branches in Lviv, Odessa, and Kharkiv, so in different regions in Ukraine, and they're all responsible for preserving the cultural heritage.
До війни, по крайній мірі до 24 лютого 2022 року, у нас в Україні було 576 музеїв, які зберігали 1,6 мільйонів унікальних предметів Музейного фонду України.
So till the full-scale invasion, so till the 24th of the February last year, there was more than 576 museums, and they kept more than 11 millions of artifacts of different kinds.
На жаль, наші музеї не були готові до такої кровопролитної, руйнівної війни. І в цьому випадку я скажу, що тут теорія розійшлася з практикою.
I would like to say that, unfortunately, Ukraine was not ready for such a blood war that caused so much damage. And I would like to stress the attention that the theory was not in hand with the reality that happened.
На самому разі була порушена логіка, куди евакуювати, як евакуювати, де транспорт взяти, де дати гроші.
So our first questions were about logistics. So what to evacuate firstly, where to evacuate, where to find the money so that to make it process happen.
В переважній більшості музейні заклади, в переважній більшості вирішували це питання самостійно. Ховали в квартири, до речі, в хати, в підвали, в якісь фондові сховища, які не відповідали стану збережності музейних предметів.
So at first, of course, the museum staff was mostly responsible to hide all the art objects and artifacts, and they even hide it in their apartments. And but of course, they thought about the conditions, and at first the conditions were not really the best, so that to make this happen.
Самою великою проблемою стали це кадри, це люди. З початком війни в деяких музеях залишилось по 1-2 співробітника, в основному жінки. І це була величезна проблема, з якою спіткнулися музейні заклади.
So, and one of the biggest problems was also the staff and the people, because after the full-scale invasion, not a lot of people remained in the museums, and moreover, it was mostly women. So for one museum, it remained like 1 or 2 women in a team.
На сьогодні музейні заклади можна розділити на декілька категорій. Я трошки повторюся з паном Ігорем. Це перша категорія – це розграбовані, це ті музейні колекції, які вивезені за територію України. Тут називається всього декілька музеїв, тому що є проблеми розмістити.
So Svetlana would like to pay attention to some groups of the museums that were damaged due to the war. And the first one was the museums. The collections of those were looted and taken abroad. And you had the slide with some of the museums, but it's only the few among more.
Частина музеїв була просто втрачена. Це попадання ракет, це пожежі, і таким чином ми втратили повністю деякі колекції.
So here you can see some of the museums that were completely damaged by the direct hit and then by the fire, and that in these museums all the collections and all the art objects unfortunately are gone.
Також мається велика проблема – це з вибуховими хвилями, які відбулися у нас, перепрошую, десь я так туди перескочила, перепрошую. Так, я перепрошую. З вибуховими хвилями. Може, ви про це прочитали, це в інтернеті було. 24 жовтня 2022 року в центрі міста було влучання 2 ракет. Це була вулиця, на якій 6 музейних закладів і реставраційний центр. До речі, це фото реставраційного центру.
The second group is the museums that the buildings of which were damaged due to the blast waves, and one of the biggest attacks was in October 2022 in Kyiv, in the very, very center of the Kyiv, where 6 national museums were hit, and here you can see the picture of the Kyiv branch of the National Restoration Center.
Стало питання збереження зруйнованого, порятунок музейних предметів. Для реставраційного центру це перше було, що обстеження стану збереженості. Щоб розуміти, яка частина з цих предметів потребує реставрацію. Цю реставрацію можна робити на базі музею, чи найбільш складну потрібно транспортувати в Київ, Одесу, Харків і Львів.
So the process started, and the first phase of the process for the center was to evaluate what are the conditions of this art object, and whether we can do the work and restoration work directly in the museums, or it needs more help, so that we need to take it to the branches in Kyiv, Odessa, Kharkiv, or Lviv, and to do work with the special equipment there.
Разом з тим реставраційний центр спіткнувся теж з проблемою. Відсутність кадрів, переважна більшість реставраторів виїхала за кордон, відсутні реставраційні матеріали, транспорт, обладнання.
So the problems that we faced firstly was the staff shortage, because a lot of the staff of the center went abroad so that to save their lives, and also there was a very big lack of the restoration materials as well as with the equipment and the vehicles, so that to make the transportation.
З перших днів війни команда реставраційного центру залишилась в Києві. Ми почали звертатися в різні організації за допомогою, тому що самі ми справитися не могли. І в цьому випадку зразу ж пішов нам з відкритими руками і душею. Це ALIPH, це Смітсонський інститут, це міжнародна транспортна компанія Uber.
So the core team of the center remained in Kyiv, and for the first days they started the process of reaching the possible donors, international organizations, so that for support. And Svetlana makes also thankful to the ALIPH Foundation, Smithsonian institution, and also Uber company that were the first to respond to the needs of the center.
Особлива допомога була ALIPH, саме фонду ALIPH. І починаючи з травня 2022 року, ми працювали в 250 музеях.
One of the first help was from the most valuable help was from ALIPH Foundation, and the work started, the collaboration started from the May 2022, and from May till now, the team of the center already worked in more than 250 museums in Ukraine.
Почали ми свою роботу з деокупованих територій. Тобто ті території, які були під рашистами, або ті території, де піддавалися ворожим ударам. Це Буча, Ірпінь, Ворзель, Макаров, Бородянка, Чернігів, Ахтирка, Тростянець і дуже багато інших міст, де були дуже серйозні пошкодження.
So here you can see the cities from which the center started their work. It was mostly the cities that were temporarily occupied by Russian troops and had direct hits.
Наша робота полягала в тому, що кожного дня в 7 годин ранку ми виїжджали в музейні заклади і поверталися дуже пізно. Таким чином ми проїхали 50 тисяч кілометрів. Пізніше трошки нам Смітсонський інститут допоміг нам з готелями, і ми виїжджали на тиждень, на 2. Тобто це була більш раціональна робота, тому що можна було працювати і реставрувати, і обстежувати. Разом з тим хочу сказати, що це було виїздів в тому році 1121, в цьому році вже 130. Це виїздів в музейні заклади України.
From the first days, we started to go to these museums, and the total distance of the journeys that we made is more than 50,000 kilometers, and we already made more than 1,100 trips last year, and more than 130 this year. And at first, also Smithsonian, it was very great help that helped with to provide the hotels, because it was really difficult for the team to go in the early morning at 7 a.m. and then return in the in very late evening. And when Smithsonian was so helpful to provide the accommodation, it really helped to make more relevant support for 2 or 3 days.
Я бігло вам покажу стан музеїв і музейних предметів, що відбувалося з нашими пошкодженими творами.
Here you can briefly see some pictures of the damaged art objects within the Ukrainian museum, so that to understand what should be done.
В даному випадку це Тростянець, це Чернігівський музей, пробиті картини Чернігівського художнього музею, уламки від ракет, уламки від металу в підрамниках, пробиті меблі, ізюм.
You can see the it was small metal from the missile that was directly hit the paintings, as well as you can see these holes from the direct hits to the paintings.
Ізюм, кам'яні баби. Так, чекайте, щось воно не переключається. Дуже відома скульптура Сковороди, яка реставрувалася якраз до того, як вже сталася пожежа.
It was the Skovoroda Museum that has, by the way, the direct hit, and here's the only one sculpture of Skovoroda. It's a famous Ukrainian philosopher, and it was fortunately it was saved, and that's how the restoration works were made.
До речі, реставрацію проводили фахівці Харківської філії, яка позазнала пошкоджень саме в Харкові. Там дуже серйозна зараз проблема із приміщенням нашої філії.
And here you can see representatives of the Kharkiv branch of the center, and by the way, their office in Kharkiv was also damaged.
Це в Коцюбинському музеї, тобто меблі, стіни. І на сьогодні що потрібно було? Це обстеження, консервація, реставрація, саме збереження цих музейних предметів, які пошкоджені, якщо можна сказати, війною. Це обстеження в Іванкова, картин Марії Примаченко.
Here you can see the works in Ivankiv. It's in Kyiv Oblast, and this is the works of one of the most famous Ukrainian painters, Maria Primachenko.
Різні музеї. Ми працювали в самих різних умовах. І в підвальних приміщеннях, і в фондових, і в якихось інших саме сховищах, де зберігалися твори мистецтва.
So we have been working in really different and difficult conditions. We even have working in the basement, so that to restore the painting just there now, so that to have the immediate response.
Дуже важко було працювати, тому що це була велика напруга. В музеях практично не було людей, з ким би хто би з нами міг контактувати. Але незважаючи на те, ми виконували свої обов'язки, ми виконували свою місію.
So it was really even difficult to work psychologically and mentally, because there were not a lot of people in the cities and that museums remained, but we still continue to do our mission.
Я хочу вам показати приклади реставрації творів мистецтва на базі музеїв, які були пошкоджені під час військових дій.
You can see also the examples of how the center representatives restore the paintings that were damaged.
Ці предмети, дуже багато предметів просто були нетранспортабельні, дуже великих розмірів, і неможливо це зробити було, навіть привезти в місто Київ їх.
The works were done directly within these museums because they were immovable, so that to put them to the headquarters or to another branches of the center.
Я хочу трошки зупинитися на допомогі реставраційному центру саме ALIPH. Тому що без цієї допомоги неможливо зробити такий величезний пласт роботи, який був здійснений.
And now I would like to tell you a couple of words of the ALIPH support, so that to understand how it was important for us.
Це придбання реставраційних матеріалів, інструментів, реставраційного і наукового обладнання, допоміжних засобів і захисних, індивідуальних захисних теж засобів.
Mostly it was about restoration materials and tools, then special restoration equipment, as well as special chemical protection, including gloves, suits, etc.
Я перепрошую, погано переключається. Оце в даному випадку і пилісос, і підйомники, які нам просто необхідні були для роботи.
You can see some of the equipment. It was the vacuum cleaner on the left, and on the right it was the table that helps you to make the painting on that level so that to work with it.
Різні інструменти, різні клеї, розчинники.
Different types of clays or restoration materials.
Захисні засоби для проведення консервації, реставрації і дослідження.
In different types of chemical protection.
Безпосередньо хочу сказати про гранти, які дійсно були у нас в ALIPH, оскільки в нас тема сьогодні 6 років саме цієї організації. Це величезна допомога, яка просто нецінима. Крім того, що придбані були реставраційні матеріали, окремі реставраційні матеріали і інструментарій, була допомога щодо придбання наукового і реставраційного обладнання. Між ALIPH і Польщею був укладений договір з музеєм друкарства, письменності і друкарства щодо навчання 3 наших художників-реставраторів саме на обладнанні, яке працює для реставрації паперу. Це книги, графіка, документи.
So the next grant project from ALIPH, it was providing the special equipment to the center, and beforehand, so that to train 3 representatives of the center, they had the special workshops in Poland, in Grebocin, in the Grebocin Museum, so that to train how to use this equipment, and then this equipment will be transported to Kyiv, so that to the center representatives can work on it.
Зараз на фото можна побачити якраз стажування наших реставраторів. Це доливочна машина і дезінфікуюче устаткування. Зараз це обладнання на тому тижні має прибувати уже в Київ, декілька між траншами.
Here you can see the photos from these trainings, the museum representatives and the director of the museum, and here you can see also the types of different equipment. And by the way, this or next week it will be already delivered to Kyiv.
Саме така величезний подарунок від ALIPH. Це, ви знаєте, що у нас немає свого транспорту. Це нонсенс для Національного науково-дослідного реставраційного центру України. Для нас була придбана мобільна реставраційна лабораторія, яка дозволяє нам працювати як швидка допомога для виїзду, для транспортування інструментів, обладнання і проведення терміновішої роботи.
And the next one of the most important projects supported by ALIPH, it was to providing the mobile laboratory, to provide the vehicle so that the representatives of the center can go with the special equipment directly to these museums and make their works there. And so 4 vehicles to be provided, and 1 is already operating in Kyiv.
Ми дуже вдячні ALIPH, оскільки сьогодні така дата і зустріч нас з колегами, тому що, будемо говорити, якби не ця допомога, ми не змогли б зробити той величезний пласт роботи, який був зроблений за цей рік.
We're very grateful to ALIPH, because without ALIPH support we cannot do all this work in Ukraine.
Щиро дякую вам.
Thank you.
Thank you, Salim. Oh, wait, let me introduce you. So I think between Svetlana and Ihor's presentation, I think the cultural workers that were shown in those slides in that presentation, these are people that are defending their country, their culture, and their freedom. And where Putin, in this case, has made culture both a justification for war, saying that Ukraine doesn't have a culture worthy of national sovereignty, the way to prove that is to bomb it and to obliterate it. And I think what we've seen with Ihor's work, your colleagues and networks, with Svetlana and your staff, and Minister Chieva, with the professionals that you've sponsored and the networks you've created, is people defending who they are. People defending who they are. And that is such a very basic thing to humanity. So now we have Salim Al-Menin, an architect who's going to talk about the Iraq Heritage Stabilization Program. Salim, all yours.
Thank you. Good afternoon. I'll give a little overview of Tak Isra. It's a project about an hour from the center of Baghdad. Very complex project, and we've been working on it for a few years now. Mainly because of the complexity of the project and the number of stakeholders involved. What I'll try to do is give a general overview on how we're trying to respond to this crisis. So, Tak Isra is a project of a similar period of Hagia Sophia in Istanbul. It was built by Khoury, and the Iwan, it's one of the largest unreinforced brick structure in the world. And this is the project that ALIPH is supporting, and it's one of the most interesting projects I've personally worked in. Now, when we initially started working this project, it was interesting that it was a crisis because it started collapsing after years of neglect. ISIS was in this site. This was the main security gate. And these are photos of a collapse of tons of bricks, which collapse, not necessarily the original Smithsonian, but one of the intervention that took place, poor intervention. And we're trying to kind of learn lesson from this and to avoid a similar kind of mistake which has happened before. So the initial assessment we visited before we responded to put a structure in place to make it safe. Our initial assessment kind of highlighted some key components. One, the arch was incomplete. It's a Nubian arch, which is inclined on 18 degrees. There was missing sections. There was a number of work that was undertaken, which was poorly done in the past. And of course, the climate issue, the soil and water, the water table, and the salinity of the water affecting and how it's eroding the structure. There were bricks delaminating and inclined or twisted corners, which suggested that the ground is giving. And that was our initial assessment. And from there, we decided to take the next steps. And before the next steps, we looked at how we can begin to do some initial assessment, which resulted us on doing some photogrammetry, geotechnical surveys, installing crack monitors, and to understand the water table. Basic investigation before we start implementing further responses. So one of the past conservations, I mean, this was done in the 70s. It's at the top of the Iwan. It's quite interesting to look at the concrete and the different layers of built-up work, the past intervention, how poorly it was done, and how materials were put together without really investigating the original structure and how to best respond to the environment and this kind of structure. So, ALIPH emergency stabilization or initial response was to make this site safe. And in order to make it safe, we had to take down part of the modern structure, modern fabric, so that we could even erect this structure beneath it without danger to life or health of our team. And this was very important. It almost became a sub-project within the overall project, because in the last intervention, we were told that 2 members of the team actually died on this site. So we had to do everything possible to make it safe. And after we've erected this structure, the lessons we learned from our initial assessment was to really carry out detailed investigation, to carry out and understand scientifically how the environment affects the materials, how we can better prepare and support the Iraqi Cultural Ministry, so they have a database of information that whoever takes on this project, if not in the immediate future, in the future, a long-term future, they have information that they can rely on and build up on. So our next stage, which we're about to begin, is to carry out detailed scientific investigation and structural modeling. And for that, there's a very some of the best experts on in this team, spanning from America, London, Iraq, local team, global experts, and we're going to begin to understand initially what this, because there's been a lot of modern intervention. What are the material characteristics of this? What is the original Smithsonian material was? Why it's failing? How the environment is affecting this? And use this information to develop a finite element model and then start proposing what the conservation plan might be. Now, the conservation plan, we don't know, and we want to kind of allow the scientific investigation to kind of propose, lead that. But we suspect, there's going to be initial micro-level conservation work where we begin to look at the mortar, the bricks, and then begin to see if we can, and if we need to rebuild part of it, if it is warranted, which part, the western end, the eastern end, and but we'll allow our investigation to kind of guide us in this. Now, some of the lessons learned in this project was, and it's been a long and complex project, it's the importance of engaging the stakeholders. And by that we mean stakeholders on the ground, the local community, the tribes, the ministry in Baghdad, the experts, be it from London or US or Iraq, and how we kind of take the team together and work and develop not only the proposal but implementation on the ground. And of course, the professional monitoring. And this, we realized, was one of the failing of a previous intervention, that on paper, everything looked very good, detailed, and very well considered. But when it came to implementing, nothing was implemented as it's supposed to be. So that's a very important lesson learned, and it's something that even on other projects we see, that we take our eyes off the project for even sometime, an hour, we go back and we see things are not as, we'd want it to be. So that's it really, but there's a lot of components to this project, and I think the time for us is short. And thank you, ALIPH, and the rest of the team. Thank you here.
Yeah, if only it was what we write on paper, if only that came true. But I think, as was said this morning, the notion of flexibility, adaptability to situations, and the ability to learn as we're doing a project comes to the fore. Next, we have Sane Lecher, who's the Director of Cultural Emergency Response, formerly part of the Prince Claus Fund, but then declaring independence last year. Sana?
Thank you, Richard, and thank you everyone for joining us this afternoon. I realized that in this panel I have a bit of a different position than the others who are sharing their direct experience for implementation on the ground, but I'm also speaking from a funder's perspective, because we're as we have one foot in implementation for sure, we're also financially supporting projects. And I want to take you with me a little bit in how we think we can better respond to crises. So last week, as Igor already mentioned, I had the pleasure to talk a lot with 7 museum directors from Ukraine to speak about their experiences of the last year. What can we learn? What can we do better to support you? But also really telling stories about how much has actually happened, how much they've been able to do, how much they've been able to achieve, and everything actually mostly from the very beginning on their own. And I thought this was a very powerful quote from Milena, who was the director of the National Museum of History of War in Ukraine, who said there's actually a lot one can do with civil society. And that's the starting point where I want to take you in this presentation, because we as Cultural Emergency Response, we're providing first aid to cultural heritage under threat in crisis situations, being it caused by natural hazards or conflict situations. And we work directly with local partners on the ground. And we firmly believe that by strengthening local infrastructures that are already in place, we can actually provide a more efficient, a quicker, and also more inclusive type of response. So that's why I want to talk to you about localization today. And localization is actually building on that idea that there's a lot of civil society structures already in place that can be strengthened and supported. And it's lent from humanitarian sector, actually, which rethinks the way humanitarian aid is distributed from the ground up. So how civil society actors can be in the lead to determine approach and priorities, because usually they are generally better positioned to do that. They are most of the time the first ones to respond. They also have access to networks and areas that we as international organizations do not have access to, and they're with the communities before, during, and after the crisis, which means they can establish those type of relationships. So building on this idea, we are really rethinking in how we can distribute our support, actually, how we can work with partners on the ground, and how we can better make sure that there's a quick response mechanism in a crisis situation that works directly with local partners in the lead. This is our vision, so we really hope that one day, I heard it already in the panel before, that we don't have to exist anymore, but that there's actually an opportunity for local communities that they can actually safeguard their heritage themselves, that they have the infrastructures to that, access to resources, knowledge, materials, etc. So we're trying to build on that through our programming, which at the core is, as I like to describe it, a cultural ambulance, which means that we really are in there in the heat of the moment, as you will, as a first aid actor. And we try to include culture more and more in disaster response mechanisms. Of course, doing that type of work needs a certain type of preparedness as well. So we try to integrate that idea of localization in all our programming. So to be able to provide first aid and emergency response, we also realize that we need to invest in the infrastructures that need to be in place for that. So we're all the time developing our emergency response mechanism, meaning in what way can we provide funding as quickly as possible. It also means that we're actively monitoring and scouting to develop our networks in what we call gap countries. Where are countries that we don't have that much network in? What can we do to improve that? We also see that we need to help our partners strengthen their capabilities in this field as well. So we have a first aid trainings where we also invest in the leadership of people on the ground that we work with. So what can they do as organizations to apply for funding, for example? How do they manage projects, etc. So we try to invest in all ways that we can in the local infrastructures and try to strengthen those. An important element of that is making a strong case of why this is so important. You are all here, so you know that it is, but you also know that sometimes a very hard thing to sell, that why we are investing so much time in culture in the heat of the moment in times of crisis. So gathering data to make that case, to show why it's so important, to show why it contributes to peace building, for example, is also something we actively engage in on an international but also on a regional level. And that approach of localization we try to consolidate in a new-ish program that we have, which is our network of regional hubs. So we're setting up globally kind of mini SARES, as you will, which are to form a go-to center in the region for the coordination and provision of cultural emergency response. So they can provide expertise, training, they can stock up materials that can deploy quickly. They do everything to kind of create that response mechanism in the region. So we currently have 4 hubs and counting. We have one in Lebanon, of which I have the pleasure of having our hub coordinator here. Sure can answer some questions later as well, who serves the Levant region. We have one in Central America, in Guatemala. We have one in the Western Balkans, Albania, Kosovo, and Bosnia and Herzegovina, and we have one in development in the Caribbean region. And in a couple of years' time, we hope to have 6 to 10 hubs all across the world. The benefit of that is that they're also an international network, so together they can learn from each other's experiences, they can support each other in times of crisis, and we provide also kind of a mentorship component to that, as you will, because the aim is that we support them for 2 years, but it's not a project. We're trying to embed entities in local infrastructures that are there to last, also after those 2 years. So together with our hub partners, we try to find follow-up funding as well to continue their efforts for cultural emergency response also after those 2 years. That's a challenge, but I'll come back to that later. So I want to share a couple of examples with you, actually, why we already see that this methodology is working for us, but actually also other actors in this field to provide quicker response, but also be more efficient. It's more tailored, actually, to the needs that are actually there on the ground. And it's also more inclusive because it allows the local actors to be in the lead of determining priorities and also knowing the sensitivities. So one example I want to start with is actually from our hub in Lebanon. They have developed this Juwazia training concept, which brings together the different actors that have played a significant role in the response after the Beirut blast to also consolidate that network and experience that they build up. And they bring together with the Department of Antiquities, so Sarkis is involved in this as well, but also museum institutions, the Red Cross, the Lebanese armed forces they work closely with. An advantage of having, continuing to build on that network that was created after or in a crisis situation, actually, is that you have the capability to, of course, not lose that experience, but also to create deployable capacity throughout the different sectors that you need to actually provide efficient cultural emergency response. Because in the end, we of course hope that culture has a significant place in other disaster response mechanisms as well. So the Juwazia, which actually means readiness, is a very important case for that, and a model actually we hope to duplicate for our other hubs as well. Another example is that we actually, by investing in that regional capacity, that we can create immediately deploy capacity in the region as well, in terms of people, but also into materials. So a good example of that is actually our hub in Guatemala, who has deployed twice in the past year. First time to support the National Library of El Salvador in safeguarding their collection after flooding. At the time, there was not the materials necessary, nor the capacity actually to deal with wet paper, because that's quite a specific thing that you need to know how to do that. So our hub deployed with a team of experts to work with the staff of the library to provide the expertise, but also the materials. Second time, they deployed to the Maya archaeological heritage sites near the Mexican border, which are usually areas that are very difficult to access because of well, the value the site has for local communities. But the advantage was because of the hub had already been actively working with these communities and creating a network for some years already, he was actually granted access to help stabilize the Mayan sites, which resulted that we have now established a satellite hub near the Mexican border to actually also provide that service to other heritage sites in the region, so also in Mexico and in Belize. A third example is actually that because we are committed to do a longer-term investment in a partnership that we have, so 2 years and already before that, that's organizations that we know that we were working with, either they participated in our trainings, they did first aid projects with us. We have an opportunity to have a long-term trust relationship with them as well. And that has a very important advantage in how we can distribute funds in an emergency situation. So it allows us to provide flexible funding, which is more or less a pool of funds that we provide to be coordinated and implemented by the local partner, by our hub, who can then actually spend that according to priority and needs that arise on the field. So that has worked well twice already. Once was after the Beirut blast, where the then not yet hub, but Biladi, NGO Biladi, who we have the hub with, was able to administer that funds and actually purchase material that was needed for the different museum institutions they helped, covering windows, doors, roofs, etc. And another example is more recent, which is with the Heritage Emergency Response Initiative in Ukraine, where they did the same thing. It was a flexible pool of funding, which they could actually use to organize their field missions. We were not in control of where those field missions were going to, what was prioritized. It was being Harry who was determining that approach, because who are we, in that sense, saying that this or that should have priority over the other? And that's, I think, is a model that we can explore further as well to see how we can move even faster with the deployment of funds. And last but not least, it's our hub in the Caribbean, which we are currently setting up with the Cultural Heritage Emergency Network of CARBICA. They're very fond of abbreviations there, which is the Caribbean branch of the International Council of Archives. And what is really interesting there is that because of its a long-term investment in this topic already in the region from a grassroots level, is that they were actually able last year, when we committed to work with them, were able to integrate culture in disaster protocols of Curaçao. And that's really important because in the whole disaster response in the region, being it one of the most vulnerable regions in this world right now because of climate change, they did not have a separate protocol for culture, which prevented them from acting as a civil society group and kind of lending them their experts to protect culture in a crisis situation. Because of the protocol, they're actually now open doors to also collaborating with, for example, the Royal Dutch Marines on the island, but also with SEDIMA. And SEDIMA is the regional organization that provides disaster response for the whole Caribbean region. And that, of course, makes it interesting, because then we can see if we can give culture more of a prominent place in the way they respond to natural disasters in the region. So in conclusion, we definitely see the benefit of working in a way that puts localization first. I think we can really be quicker in our response, because we have the people and the resources already in place. We have materials already in place. Therefore, it's more efficient. We can have local coordination points, what Igor just said. There's really a need also to have one point sometimes that people to refer to. It's not replacing the others, but at least it's one go-to center where people can pick up information or discuss or organize or coordinate things. And I also think what is an important element, I feel it's a more inclusive approach of the distribution of funds as well, because it's not an international organization determining priorities, it's on the ground that priorities are being determined. And also that gives access to organizations, institutions, people that we would not have access to. which makes the distribution of funding also more equal. As I said, this is also challenging, and I realized that we've been piloting different models of setting up hubs like this, and I cannot tell you for 100% that we've found the way of doing this. It's extremely complicated to find a sustainable solution for this. So what happens after 2 years that we fund? Who takes over? How do we embed this in institutions that can either source local funding, that a local government says or regional government says, okay, we take this on, we find it so important. So that's something we're still working on and thinking on. We're working with our hubs on that and finding regional funding solutions, for example, or us as an international organization, we can really have a bridge function there where we can connect the international field and our networks to the regional networks. That seems to be working quite well, but that's a challenge. And we heard it before already today, the connection of all stakeholders that need to be involved. There's many people who want to help. How do you know that you don't duplicate things? How do you know that you don't replace things that are already there? Because that's not the intention. So how do we get everyone on board and make sure that this is a system that does not only work for us as Sarah, but for the whole field? Because I think that's the conclusion, that if we manage to do this together, that we really create an infrastructure that's also for recovery and reconciliation projects, because that's not what we do. People can make use of the actors that are already in place and the capacity that's already in place. So I really think that this could be a good way forward for the field in the future, and I fully agree with Milena if she says that there's actually a lot you can do with a strong civil society. Thank you.
Thank you, Sana. And, I think Sana illustrates a marvelous point, is that, we all don't, everybody in this room who works in this space and our colleagues around the world, we don't have the luxury of sitting around and spending 3 years thinking this out. We're learning by doing, and we have to, and therefore I really appreciate the honesty that Sana, you, and Svetlana, and Ihor, and Salim, everybody's bringing to this, because we're learning by doing, and we don't have that time. Another hat of mine is being a professor, and I could sit around with graduate students, and we could debate a lot about how to do things, but we do not have that luxury because of the people we serve. And so it's marvelous, I think, the honesty people bring to this in terms of trying to figure it out. Now, our last speaker is Ibu Ubelman, who's the CEO of ICONEM.
So that is him, but...
Oh, that is him, I am sorry.
But I'll introduce myself. I think I'm going to continue in French, not only out of pure patriotism, but also because I think what I say would be much more precise in French. Donc me voilà, je m'appelle Ule Keshishian. Je viens de Paris et d'Arménie et je représente aujourd'hui le centre TUMO, qui est un centre qui œuvre pour l'éducation dans les technologies créatives. Alors, pour me présenter brièvement TUMO, on offre à des 12-18 ans un accès gratuit à de l'éducation qui tourne autour de sujets tels que la créativité pure, donc du design, de la musique, mais aussi et surtout de la technologie. La technologie, ça veut dire qu'on va donner des cours de codage, des cours de modélisation 3D. Notre approche de l'éducation est très libre. On a créé un logiciel spécifique à TUMO qui s'exporte beaucoup maintenant. Il y a des centres TUMO qui ont ouvert à Paris, à Beyrouth, à Moscou, à Berlin, et on espère franchiser au maximum notre modèle qui, selon nous, est une manière de donner accès aux jeunes à des connaissances techniques très utiles, puisque, notamment quand la guerre a commencé en Arménie, nous avons voulu contribuer à notre manière pour préserver notre patrimoine, en mettant l'accent sur le scanning 3D, puisqu'on avait cette composante technologique qui nous rapprochait de la matière. Là-dedans, grâce à ICONEM, nous avons collaboré avec ICONEM, qui, eux, étaient déjà experts en la matière. pour scanner une partie du patrimoine en danger de l'Arménie. Comment nous est venue l'idée? En fait, c'est parti de deux constats. Le premier constat qui nous a un peu horrifiés, c'était de se rendre compte qu'il n'y avait aucune base de données étatique en Arménie qui référençait les sites protégés ou à protéger. Et le second constat est celui de la menace extrême qui pèse sur nous et de l'urgence. Aujourd'hui, moi, c'est un exemple très personnel, j'ai déménagé en Arménie il y a 2 mois de Paris. La première chose qu'on fait quand on arrive à Yerevan, c'est de regarder où est le bunker de son quartier. On ne sait pas ce qui va se passer demain, on ne sait pas ce qui va se passer dans 3 semaines, la menace est très lourde. Et donc, les actions préventives pour préserver des traces du patrimoine arménien sont d'autant plus importantes. Aujourd'hui, dans la région sud de l'Arménie, dans le Sunnique, on a déjà 140 km² de terres qui sont occupées. Et l'histoire nous a malheureusement dit ce que la perte de terre coûte à l'histoire arménienne. Nous avons déjà perdu des terres sur lesquelles ont été détruits des monuments millénaires. Vous avez peut-être pu entendre parler du cimetière de Julfa dans le Nakhitchevan qui abritait des sépultures du XIIe siècle qui ont été détruites, filmées d'ailleurs depuis la frontière iranienne à coups de marteau. On sait ce que ça va nous coûter et donc on veut évidemment préserver les monastères, les églises, les pétroglyphes qu'il y a en Arménie, les villages dont les fondations et les sépultures, encore une fois, datent de plus de 3000 ans. Dans cette urgence-là, on a déjà collaboré avec Iconem, comme je vous l'ai dit, de manière très rapide. Et ça, la CEO de Tumo, qui est donc ma boss, dit particulièrement que c'est dû au fait qu'on a eu cette liberté d'agir très vite parce qu'on est des organismes privés. On a essayé de notre part de passer par des organismes publics, mais évidemment, et c'est normal, ce sont parfois des éléphants administratifs, alors qu'un Tumo et un Iconem, en 2 jours, littéralement en 2 jours, peut se procurer de l'équipement, avoir une experte d'Iconem qui va prendre l'avion et qui va arriver en Arménie et partir en expédition pour scanner des monuments. L'une des urgences qui n'est pas vraiment à notre main est évidemment l'urgence du financement, puisqu'il faut savoir que c'est compliqué malheureusement de trouver du financement de manière aussi rapide. Et sur le plan opérationnel, nous voulons nous engager à faire en sorte de pouvoir réagir dans les 24 heures. Donc ça, qu'est-ce que ça veut dire? Ça veut dire qu'il faut avoir des experts qui sont disponibles. Et quand je dis des experts, c'est d'avoir une équipe avec un expert qui est l'expert de la photogrammétrie, un expert du drone, un expert du scanning laser. Il faut aussi avoir des relations avec les locaux, parce que quand on va dans un site qui est inaccessible, finalement, c'est le villageois ou le guide touristique du coin qui va le mieux savoir comment accéder par des chemins tortueux à ces sites que nous souhaitons scanner et protéger, et documenter du moins, si on ne peut pas les protéger. La composante locale, comme ça a été déjà dit plusieurs fois, est ce qui nous préoccupe le plus. Et c'est pourquoi notre projet chez Tumo, c'est de créer un département en Arménie qui serait spécialisé dans le scanning 3D. Pour ça, on a évidemment besoin d'entraînement parce qu'on est loin d'être les meilleurs dans le domaine et c'est là qu'Iconem nous aide le plus. Et surtout, pourquoi on a besoin d'une équipe locale? C'est que malheureusement, le conflit en Arménie bénéficie de moins de solidarité parce que moins médiatisé, et que moi, par exemple, pourquoi je suis rentrée en Arménie de France, c'est qu'on se sent responsable en tant qu'Arménien du patrimoine arménien. Parce qu'on n'est peut-être jamais mieux servi que par soi-même, en tout cas quand on a l'impression que peu d'autres vont pouvoir nous aider. Et donc c'est là aussi que je fais appel à vous, parce que je pense que c'est aussi le devoir des experts. Si vous voulez, moi je ne peux pas en vouloir à l'opinion publique de ne pas s'intéresser à un lointain pays, je ne peux pas. Mais c'est le devoir des experts qui savent d'agir dans l'urgence quand ils sont sollicités. Et surtout, c'est un devoir qui est apolitique. Qu'on n'aide pas la population arménienne menacée, Ça, je le comprends aussi. C'est une zone qui est extrêmement complexe et, si vous voulez, apporter une aide humanitaire, enfin une aide militaire, pardon, en Arménie, c'est une chose qui est difficilement concevable pour beaucoup. En revanche, œuvrer de manière apolitique sur ce qui nous concerne tous, c'est-à-dire notre patrimoine, l'humain, le monument n'a rien de politique. Nous sommes tous les héritiers de ce patrimoine-là, et c'est pour ça que j'espère qu'on agira tous dans l'urgence pour préserver notre histoire. Je vais passer maintenant le micro à Yves.
Merci. There is a remote.
Sunny.
There may be a remote somewhere. Merci beaucoup pour ce témoignage. Effectivement, on a été contacté par Tumo pour agir le plus vite possible. Et d'habitude, alors donc moi je suis Yves Bellman, je suis le architecte de formation et cofondateur d'Iconem, cette compagnie qui développe justement des technologies pour la documentation du patrimoine en danger. Et en fait, d'habitude, ce qui se passe, c'est qu'on arrive après la catastrophe, que ce soit à Beyrouth, après l'explosion du port, que ce soit à Mossoul, que ce soit à Palmyre. Donc, on a documenté ces sites, mais après la catastrophe. Et là, cette fois-ci, dans ce projet qu'on va vous présenter, la démarche a été différente. On a essayé d'agir en Arménie avant une possible catastrophe. Alors, on ne peut pas prédire les catastrophes, mais par contre, on peut évaluer le niveau de risque qui pèse sur une région particulière. Et donc, on a travaillé avec Tumo pour essayer d'identifier en Arménie les zones qui étaient les moins stables. Ce qu'on a fait, c'est qu'on a imaginé une buffer zone à côté de la frontière, donc la frontière orientale de l'Arménie. C'est la frontière sur laquelle, effectivement, elle est sous pression militaire, on va dire, et malheureusement, elle change. Et dans cette buffer zone, on a listé tous les sites importants et on a décidé, donc les sites étant accessibles, les sites étant effectivement accessibles par les routes de l'Arménie, on a décidé de faire un inventaire, un archivage 3D de ces sites. Cet archivage, donc, pour pouvoir le mettre à disposition des experts, mais aussi à disposition des étudiants de Tumo, on a construit une base de données qu'on voit ici. Donc on voit effectivement cette fameuse frontière, et tous les points bleus qu'on a autour de la frontière, ce sont effectivement les sites qu'on est allé un par un scanner, donc avec de la photographie, de la photogrammétrie et des drones, et cela dans différentes régions. Là, on est au sud, par exemple. Et donc, on a pu, en quelques semaines, scanner plus d'une trentaine en fait, de sites sur ces régions frontalières. Alors, un premier exemple. Alors, je ne vais pas prononcer le nom des sites, mais vous pouvez le lire, parce que je n'ai pas l'accent arménien. Mais, premier exemple, une église. Et ce que vous voyez ici, en fait, ce sont les tunnels militaires qui ont été creusés donc, par l'armée d'Azerbaïdjan qui est de l'autre côté de la frontière. Donc vous imaginez qu'il y a à peine 50 mètres entre la frontière, donc les positions militaires, et l'église. Donc vous imaginez aussi la difficulté et la complexité de travailler sur ces territoires qui sont vidés de leurs habitants. Les habitants sont partis parce que c'est des territoires qui deviennent trop dangereux. Et donc l'objectif est bien sûr, alors là on rentre un petit peu dans la plateforme, on rentre dans le modèle 3D et qui nous permet d'avoir des plans intérieurs, extérieurs et de pouvoir effectivement documenter avec précision ces sites. Voilà différents monuments. Donc un autre monument, on a été justement confronté à beaucoup de monuments qui étaient très isolés, parce que ces zones près de la frontière, elles sont souvent difficiles d'accès. Étant difficiles d'accès, vous voyez que l'état de conservation de ces églises n'est pas forcément bon. On voit qu'il y a de la végétation effectivement qui a poussé au-dessus des murs. Alors ce que vous voyez ici, en fait, c'est un nuage de points. Donc ce sont des millions, voire des milliards de points qui reconstituent par le procédé de la photogrammétrie donc la forme et la couleur du lieu en question. Hein. Et là, vous avez le même monument, effectivement, dans lequel, du coup, on peut rentrer, voir l'intérieur et voir pierre par pierre, en fait, ce qui reste. Donc, documenter, c'est archivé pour le futur, mais c'est aussi sécurisé d'une certaine manière. Une fois qu'on documente, effectivement, une zone et qu'on sait que les pierres sont sur cette zone, ben, ça rend plus difficile leur destruction ou plus difficile leur disparition parce que on peut témoigner que voilà, ces pierres étaient là donc, à cette époque. Donc, ce qui est intéressant aussi dans le cas de monuments qui sont, disons, un peu perdus dans la forêt, en travaillant sur ces modèles 3D, bon, là encore, on peut dessiner, révéler en fait les plans de ces églises, donc l'épaisseur des murs, donc leur stabilité aussi, et pouvoir effectivement faire des évaluations de stabilité. La documentation photogrammétrique permet aussi d'avoir une vision millimétrique, voire inframillimétrique en fait, des sculptures, des bas-reliefs, hein, et on a différents moyens pour justement les visualiser et pour voir en détail effectivement ces décors. Alors, des exemples d'églises comme ça, effectivement, on en a beaucoup. C'est le principe de l'inventaire. Et ce qui est important, alors quand on commence à avoir beaucoup de données, ce qui est important, c'est de pouvoir les stocker et de pouvoir les partager, surtout les partager aux experts internationaux et aux Arméniens et au monde entier, en fait. Hein. Et c'est donc le rôle de toute cette infrastructure de plateforme qu'on a construit justement pour répondre à ce besoin de prévention. Hein. Alors, les modèles 3D, on peut les couper un peu dans tous les sens. Donc, on va étudier, on va pouvoir prendre des mesures, on va pouvoir étudier facilement, justement, à distance, en fait, cette architecture. Là, on voit effectivement... Donc, ça, c'est une vue des mêmes données, donc le nuage de points avec des couleurs. Et là, c'est le nuage de points en transparence, et on voit toute la structure interne, hein, y compris les poutres, les pierres, et ce qui permet d'avoir voilà, une vision aussi architecturale très précise, hein, de ce monument. Alors, on peut aussi, donc, en élévation, faire des coupes, évaluer le poids de la maçonnerie. Donc là encore, la stabilité générale du monument. Donc on a travaillé à la fois avec des architectes, spécialistes des structures, à la fois avec des historiens aussi pour contextualiser en fait ces relevés. On a fait des recherches dans les archives textuelles pour voir aussi où étaient mentionnés, dans quel document étaient mentionnés en fait ces édifices pour pouvoir les dater avec plus de précision. Et bien sûr, tout un travail justement sur... l'avantage, c'est qu'on peut du coup prendre des mesures de manière très précise, hein, des hauteurs, des largeurs, qui nous permettent, là encore, de définir... voilà, ça c'est un autre exemple encore plus complexe et évolué d'architecture arménienne qui est aujourd'hui quasiment rendu inaccessible. Hein. On voit des états de destruction du coup qui sont effectivement préoccupants. On peut essayer d'évaluer, alors indépendamment du contexte géopolitique cette fois-ci aussi, l'urgence d'intervenir sur ces maçonneries, tout simplement pour que ces maçonneries restent debout. Parce que même si il ne se passe aucun problème d'un point de vue militaire, en fait, ces églises sont en danger. Hein. Donc, il y a voilà, certaines églises qui sont quasiment invisibles, en fait, hein, qui sont tellement prises dans la végétation qu'elles sont quasiment invisibles aujourd'hui. Donc, il faut effectivement, grâce à ces techniques de drone, grâce à ces relevés intérieurs, on peut effectivement en avoir tous les détails. Alors, ça c'est la vue en plan, en fait, donc avec la végétation. Et là, c'est la vue, justement, voilà, sans la végétation. Donc ça permet effectivement de voir aussi des édifices qui sont aujourd'hui complètement invisibles, en fait. Donc, il y a tout un travail, effectivement, d'approche, de recherche, parce que ces édifices ne sont pas forcément visibles sur les vues satellites. Il faut effectivement, justement, s'appuyer sur la connaissance locale, les communautés, pour aller rejoindre ces édifices. Et souvent, ça prend 2 heures, 4 heures pour trouver la bonne route ou pour trouver effectivement le bon point, le bon point GPS et pouvoir effectivement du coup positionner. Voilà, ça c'est l'intérieur de cet édifice. Donc là, on a encore une structure encore plus fragilisée qu'il va falloir effectivement restaurer sans trop attendre, hein, et sans attendre la catastrophe non plus. Hein. Voilà, ce sont des différentes vues. On voit aussi dans ces édifices qui n'ont pour certains plus de... Je me dépêche. I will speed up. On voit la qualité aussi du décor et de la sculpture, hein, donc qui rend encore plus indispensable en fait ces interventions. Voilà. Donc juste une idée un petit peu générale de toutes ces églises qu'on a documentées. D'autres ont été restaurées parce qu'elles sont plus accessibles, elles sont dans les villages, mais contiennent des trésors, hein, des trésors de peinture. Voilà. Là encore, qu'on a pu numériser avec très grande précision avec ces procédés de photogrammétrie, et notamment sur des peintures qui étaient difficiles d'accès, en partie hautes. Hein. Donc, ça va aussi constituer un corpus, hein, pour les historiens, pour les chercheurs, justement, qui pourront étudier avec plus de précision ces œuvres d'art. Voilà. Donc, on avait des églises, on a aussi des villages abandonnés, comme effectivement ce village qui a été abandonné pendant le bloc soviétique. Là encore, parce que voilà, c'était des localités qui étaient trop éloignées. Donc finalement, ce qui est ressorti aussi de ces missions qu'une menace importante, outre effectivement les conflits et la guerre, c'est tout simplement l'éloignement. Hein. L'éloignement de cet héritage qui effectivement rend très difficile son entretien. Donc voilà un petit peu ce tour d'horizon. Cette base de données actuellement, elle est disponible à tous les experts qui cherchent à travailler sur l'Arménie, aux Arméniens. Notre objectif, c'est de l'ouvrir le plus possible. Et si certains d'entre vous, justement, ont besoin d'accéder à ces données, on est ravis d'en donner l'accès. Et je vais peut-être te donner le dernier mot. Oui, non ? Pourquoi pas ? Enfin, pour résumer un petit peu, effectivement, c'est que ces données vont aussi servir et servent aujourd'hui à TUMO, aussi à la formation, à la fois technologique, mais aussi à l'éducation sur l'histoire de l'Arménie.
Merci. Je vais à peu près répéter la dernière phrase. Je pense qu'il y a on en retire 2 choses. On en retire d'une part, évidemment, des merveilles pédagogiques, puisqu'on apprend beaucoup. Ces expériences-là aussi permettent de pousser la technique par l'expérience. On comprend ce dont on a besoin, ce qu'on peut faire dans des situations d'urgence, ce qu'on ne peut pas faire dans des situations d'urgence. On se forme de plus en plus pour pouvoir répondre au plus vite en cas de besoin. Et évidemment, c'est aussi un devoir de documentation historique qui nous importe particulièrement aux Arméniens, de garder une trace de ce que nous avons été, de garder une trace à un instant T aussi, parce que ça nous aide, par exemple, en scannant un édifice aujourd'hui, je pourrais savoir dans 20 ans à quel point il s'est détérioré. On peut aussi, comme ça, déterminer des manières de protéger, plus ou moins savoir ce dont on a besoin pour protéger notre patrimoine. Donc voilà. C'est pourquoi on est très très reconnaissant et qu'on aime de nous former à la préservation de notre patrimoine.
Merci.
Thank you. So it's amazing technology, and I think we'll have continuing uses over time. So we're running quite a bit late, but I thought, again, if we had any particular, wait, I'm hearing myself being translated. That is not good. I'm talking in English and I'm hearing in French. So I think we have time maybe for just a few questions. If somebody has a question that they want to direct to one of the panelists, Parna, you're first, or a comment in general, but please keep it directed and quick. Parna.
I thank you for your excellent moderation as well as for the great presentations that we have heard in this panel. I divided my time between this and the other one. I would like to ask to all panelists and also to you, Richard. You have been now working in the field of emergencies for a long time. And I've been listening, and I'm myself thinking about this morning on my phone. I had a message from Vanuatu, which has suffered 2 cyclones, one earthquake. There are certain parts of the world we simply do not reach out to. And there's some parts of the world we reach out to. And we also have Syria and Turkey in front of us, where 11 cities in Turkey have been damaged. 11 cities, and they're thinking of mounting response in 11 cities. My question is, what is the difference between the timeline of mounting response in the case of a conflict and in the case of I'm not going to call it a natural disaster because no disasters are natural. I'm going to call it a disaster situation where, what is the timeline difference in your experiences? And till when can we say that we are going to give response for this much of time and then early recovery will start? So phase delineation, I'm talking about phase delineation because it seems that in certain situations, the response continues and new actors keep on emerging. And in another types of situation, you need to have some sort of a, like you're moving towards a certain point. So I hope my question is clear. I would like to know from all of you, what do you think in your experience is the timeline for putting people on the ground in case of a conflict, in case of a disaster? No natural disasters.
Okay, and I don't think we have time to go through all the panelists because I'm getting told by Sandra that we have to wrap it up. So I don't know, does anybody have a particular, Sana, you want to take that? Sure.
Thank you for the question, Aparna. It's a difficult question because like, if you would have to say it, if you would want to respond immediately, of course, but the difference is also that you have to take into account, of course, ongoing humanitarian efforts. And as I said earlier, it's still difficult sometimes to integrate culture in that immediate response. So depending on the situation, it also depends on what is the right time to go in, as you will. There, again, it helps to really base yourself on, of course, the network of local experts that is there and can give a first report on the ground. So we're also doing that now with Turkey and Syria. So what is the good moment to intervene? And I think the line between immediate response and early recovery is very blurry, especially in the work that we all do, because it often goes hand in hand, right? So there's evacuations, for example, but at the same time you want to do some consolidation. But what I do notice is that often cultural emergency response gets pushed into the early recovery phase, as humanitarians do not see a place yet for culture in the first phases. And of course, saving human lives is still more important. So, Igor, you? Yes? No?
Okay. Do you want to take it, or you? Okay. So, and I think, look, remember why ALIPH gets going in the first place. ALIPH gets going because there's a need to respond quickly, relatively quickly. One, is there permission and is there a relationship with people inside a country or in a place that say, yes, help us. We have situations where, I remember personally after the tsunami in Japan, where we reached out to the Japanese to say we could help, and the Japanese government said, no, thank you, because people felt that they wanted to do it themselves, so you need permission. that was in a disaster situation. The other thing is having the money, and that's what ALIPH was for. So many times, and we see it on TV with humanitarian relief, you're raising the money to respond. You're going to somebody to talk them into doing it. The whole point is to have that funding available to act quickly. So I think some of the things you've heard, flexibility, quick, effective local involvement, partnership, using that network of collaboration, all those come into play, and then you hope that you can do it, and you say, inshallah. And with that, we'll conclude. Thank you.